We've slowed down on participants, so we can go ahead and get started. My name is Holly Papineau. I'm the programs director at Kappa and D Community Action Partnership in North Dakota. Andrea Olson, our executive director, she is sick today, so we are taking the reins. So we have Jennifer Slinger here for training on trauma-informed care. Jennifer is awesome. She was one of my graduate teachers, professors at UND when I went there for social work. But I will hand it over to Jennifer. She can introduce herself and we'll get started. If you have questions, please put them in the chat.
Yes, well, thank you, Holly. Great to see you. Thanks for welcoming me back. Yes, Tia, it's great to see you again, too. Great to see your smiling face. And there's a ton of names that look familiar, so it's super exciting. So yes, thank you very much for having me here on this Monday. There's all sorts of I'm super excited about this topic because I think it's something that is so important for us to learn about and hear about and know about and be reminded about because right, these are all things we know about trauma. We know about trauma-informed care. But sometimes it's good to just kind of, just get a little refresher and it's like, oh yes, yes, I remember that now. Or oh yep, that's a good reminder of that. So my hope today is that you'll take away some things, you'll learn a few new things, but also that you'll maybe be reminded of some things that are like, oh yeah, or some triggers may go off for you, like, oh yeah, I've worked with somebody that's maybe dealing with that or something like that. And so, and yes, thank you, Holly, for the introduction. In short, I am the director of field education for UND and also a clinical assistant professor. I've been there full time for 5 years, and I was there. Oh, I think I taught adjunct there and worked in their field program for like 4 or 5 years before that, and taught for another university adjunct before that. But I've worked in a variety of settings. So I've worked in with the state. I've worked in private nonprofit. Where I've worked in military. I've worked at a hospital. So I've worked with people all across the lifespan and seen a lot of really exciting things. So I've been drawn to just because of all of the work experience that I've had, all the different populations and settings that I've worked in. There's always been this underlying concern or issue of trauma and the trauma that people have faced. So then when I went back to get my doctorate, that was really my focus of my education. That's what I did my dissertation on. So this is a topic that is really near and dear to me, just because we see it everywhere. Nobody is immune from it. So I'm going to dive in. I do have the slides now. Holly, I think I emailed them to you. Did you, or so if they'll be sent out to people, I don't know what that process looks like, or if somebody needs a copy of the slides, I'm happy to provide them.
We got a copy of the slides, and I'm sorry, but one more thing. I put a link for the pretest in the chat. Please take it. There'll be a post-test as well. And then please put your camera on if you can.
And a copy of this recording will be on the Region 8 Academy. So if you haven't signed up for that online learning academy, you'll want to do that so you can access the recording of this training along with the pre and post test if you have somebody in your office who missed it.
Thanks.
Awesome. All right. And again, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have as we go through, or there'll be some time at the end. Or I also have my email address on at the end of the very last slide. So I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody has as follow-up or something that maybe comes up later on or later this week or whenever. So really the purpose of today, I just want to give some general information about trauma and trauma-informed care. We'll talk about how the brain reacts. Maybe some of you have heard maybe a presentation of mine before. So I've added some, I've pulled some of the things from before. So if you've heard some of these things before, because some of the data and statistics, they're still there. They're still pretty they're still pretty relevant. And also how the brain reacts is obviously really some of those things don't change, right? The trauma in fact affects people in a variety of different ways, and we'll dive into that. And then I've added quite a bit of information about interventions and support and some practical techniques. And then we'll talk about what's coming up because I've been invited back in May as well. And so I'll talk about what that presentation has in store. So again, just some statistics, some data, because I think it's important for us to know that this is a real problem, right? It's a problem no matter what population or setting that you might be working in or whom you're working with or at what stage in your career you're working with someone. But I think it's really impactful to know that 46% of children in the United States have at least one traumatic experience. And 61% of adults have had at least one of the ACEs, those adverse childhood experiences. And 70% of adults have experienced at least one traumatic event in their lifetime. So when we look at different types of trauma, this is something that I think is really important, and it's a good reminder too that trauma can come in a lot of different varieties, in a lot of different forms. And what might be traumatic for one person is not traumatic for another person. And it could be a lot of different things. Even just the first word on this slide here, this first bullet point, is loss. Loss can mean a lot of different things for a lot of different people. It could be a loss of a loved one or a significant other. It could be loss of a pet. It could be a loss of a job. It could be loss of ability. There could be a lot of different things that can go along with just that one little four-letter word. That loss it can encompass a lot of different things. And it can be intimate partner violence. It could be community violence. It could be any sort of other maltreatment, abuse, neglect. There's a lot of different things that can impact somebody. And then again, the biggest thing to remember is that not everybody experiences things the same way. I'll share throughout this presentation, I'll share a lot of examples from my own personal history or my own personal life. And the first thing that I'd like to talk about is when my father-in-law passed away. So when my father-in-law passed away, obviously he had been in my life for over 20 years. I wasn't impacted as much as my husband was, or as much as my brother-in-law, or as much as my mother-in-law, right? He was a loss. It was a loss of a figure in my life, but I wasn't impacted the same way that others are. So that's just something else to know too, is that one event that may happen definitely impacts people in different ways. So anybody that has worked with anybody ever likely knows about ACEs. And if you don't know specifically about ACEs, you know about them in general terms. But ACEs are the adverse childhood experiences. There is a significant correlation between ACEs and major health conditions as people go as they grow older. So depending on what a child has experienced in their earlier years, definitely can have impacts in their biological and physiological impacts throughout the rest of their life. Some of the other things that's really interesting about trauma, and specifically when we talk about ACEs, is the timing of lives too, is when a particular event happens, when something happens, when this trauma or when this experience does occur in somebody's life. So just like I mentioned before, everybody experiences something differently. And so like I think about this, I think about a car accident. We've all probably been in a fender bender or have been or know somebody that has been in a car accident, right? And so then the very broad question is this traumatic? Is a car accident traumatic? The answer is it could be, right? But it could also not be, right? I think back to when when I was in high school, I had been rear-ended on 2 different occasions. And I didn't realize that that had an impact. I wasn't injured. It was fine. I wasn't in trouble. It was, my parents, I wasn't in trouble from my parents or anything like that. I didn't realize that it impacted me until fast forward how many years later, when I was teaching my daughter how to drive. And I'm teaching my daughter how to drive, and here's the purpose and the making sure that you're checking your mirrors on a regular basis and things like that. And my daughter said, I notice when you drive, you are frequently checking your mirrors. And she's like, and I'm like, because again, a young driver, it's like, okay, what are the purposes of all the mirrors? She goes, I notice that you check your mirrors frequently. And she's right. And now I've noticed it too, because whenever I come out on a stop sign or a stoplight, I look in my rearview mirror to see if I'm going to be rear-ended, because I had been rear-ended twice as a high school student. And again, so it wasn't something that I thought impacted me, but it turns out it did. So now, again, broadly speaking, is a car accident traumatic? And again, so that didn't negatively impact me. It made me a more cautious driver, right? So it didn't have negative consequences, but it did impact me. But now, how about a law enforcement officer? When a law enforcement officer comes upon a car accident, is it traumatic for that law enforcement officer? It could be. Right? It could be. It could be. It also could not be. It could be like business as usual. Okay, here's the fender bender. I'm going to write up the report. Nobody is injured. Everybody goes on with their day, right? But it could be, because what if it's somebody that person knows? What if it's a very severe car accident? What if there was loss of life in this car accident? And what if that loss of life was somebody that he knew or somebody that she was related to, right? And so it could be traumatic for that law enforcement officer. Maybe the driver who rear-ended the vehicle, maybe they weren't injured, but it still could have been traumatic. Maybe they didn't have insurance, or maybe they've got liability insurance. So now that they're really concerned about how they're going to pay for this. Or maybe they borrowed their parents' car and they weren't supposed to. Now they're going to be in trouble, right? I don't know which might be worse. And again, maybe the person that was rear-ended. What if there was somebody that was on a side street that witnessed this? Was it traumatic for them? They weren't involved. It could have been. Because what if in that person's life, sometime over their life, they knew of somebody that had passed away in a car accident? So when they see or come upon a car accident, that triggers something inside of them, right? So these are all things to be thinking about, is that trauma comes in a lot of different ways and impacts things differently. So that's a great example of one event that impacts people in all different ways. And really, trauma is very difficult to define. That's the biggest thing that I hope that you take away from this, is that it is really, really difficult to define. The individual experiences really, really vary from person to person. And then the short and long-term effects also are varied. When I was trying to do my dissertation, I was trying to come up with a definition of trauma. Like, what is the definition of trauma? So in fact, part of my dissertation was, hey, this is really difficult to define. So the best descriptor that I found that I really appreciated was through SAMHSA, when they talked about the 3 E's: the event, the experience, and the effects. Right? And so depending on what that experience was, what the actual event was, and what that individual, what the effects are on that individual, I thought those were the most powerful predictors of how do we feel that this is something that is traumatic. And again, only that individual can answer that, right? They're the author of their own story. They're the expert in their own story. And again, looking at how to try to define it. That's why I didn't have just one slide with a image of a dictionary, because there's really not one really great way to define trauma. But it really can be explained in a lot of different ways, and it's very diverse, and and it varies from person to person, experience to experience. And one of the things too to consider is the whole person. We really must look at the entire person, looking at what has that person experienced before. Again, has this person been, like in my case, had I been rear-ended multiple times in high school? Well, yeah, then I was, and I'm like, okay, now I need to be careful when cars are coming up behind me. And so I'm looking at patterns. I'm looking at the intensity. Like, is it something that whatever has happened to somebody, what was the intensity? And again, that timing of their lives. Was it intense when they were younger, when it was older? If it was, again, depending on when something happens. Another example that I can share from my personal life is my parents got divorced when I was a senior in high school, and it was shocking to me because they had never like argued or anything like that. And this is the time of my life when I'm a young adult. Going out on my own, engaging in long-term, serious relationships. And I was like, I didn't trust anybody. I had major trust issues. I didn't want to date anybody. And because it was like, oh, we're just going to end up in a divorce, right? And I will tell you, so I met my husband the summer after my senior year, and I was like, no, 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 I don't want to get married. I don't. This is not anything that I want to do, and it was because of the timing of when my parents got divorced. Now, if my parents got divorced, same situation when I was two, would have I had those same trust issues? Maybe, maybe not, right? But because of the timing of my in my life as a young adult going through this and what this looked like, that's how it really I see that as a traumatic event in my life. And when we also think about looking at that whole person, we also must consider the person's history as well. Everybody's been born into their own unique set of circumstances. I love the cultural iceberg. I share this with all my students, looking at what is going on with a person and where they have come from. I usually I've been teaching the human behavior and the social environment for well over a decade. And one of the things that I talk about in every single one of my classes is, where does a person come from? Where are they now? Where do they want to go? So this is looking at that whole person, looking at their history. And part of looking at their history is looking at what is beneath the surface. This is something that this is a really great exercise that you could do with anybody that you're working with, any of your clients or recipients and you could easily just Google, like if you just look up cultural iceberg, there's so many different images or graphics. There's blank ones, there's some that have color, some that are just black and white. But this is a really great tool that you can use to try to find out a little bit more about a person's history. And so like thinking about like what does friendship mean to somebody? What does a leadership role look like to somebody? What is somebody's perception on pets or animals, or how they view people, the older population? What do they think about with like raising their family or religion or customs or even marriage? Dating, some of those sorts of things. These are all things that are below the surface. You don't see these things. But now what you do see above the surface, again, a third of what is a part of that iceberg that is above the surface is what you actually see. This is like maybe music, traditions, holidays, right? And maybe a person's religion based on what's below the surface and their upbringing maybe bleeds into how holidays are celebrated. Right. And so I think about like the upcoming holiday this weekend. Many people celebrate Easter. Many people also don't. But depending on a person's upbringing and their traditions really impacts, so what's in their deep culture impacts what that may look like above the surface. So this is one of those practical things that you can use when you're working with your clients. Like, what are the things that people don't see? What are the things that people don't know about you that maybe have impacted what we actually see above the surface? Here's another really great example is this looks fantastic, right? Like, I'd love to live here. This looks beautiful. This is when when my husband would like stop watching HGTV because then I get all sorts of projects, right? And but it's like, this looks gorgeous, and all the real estate and fixer-upper shows. It's like, hey, I have an idea, right? But the thing is that what we really need to consider is what's beneath the surface, right? This could be a flip home, right? Where it's like, yeah, that's a beautiful, like modern light fixture that they have there. And a lot of the recessed lighting, it looks really bright. but the wiring is really outdated. You know, the flooring is gorgeous. That flooring is just beautiful, right? But it's uneven. So if you would put a golf ball in the middle of that floor, it's going to roll to a corner because it's very uneven. And this stainless steel and, you know, the fingerprint proof appliances also look awesome, right? But the plumbing that it's covering up beneath the surface is going to cause bigger messes. And then you have to hope that your home insurance covers your flood insurance when your ice maker floods over, right? So when we're thinking about all of the things relating to trauma, there's a ton of resources that are available. These are just some of my favorites. That these have really great resources. A lot of the information that I have pulled for this presentation are based on these books, and of course the things that like I pulled from my dissertation and just my practice experience. So if you're looking for some good books, my favorite one that I always refer people to read because it's an easy read, because let's be honest, trauma is a heavy topic, right? But it's a really easy read is the book by Dr. Bruce Perry and Oprah Winfrey is What Happened to You. This is actually when I teach trauma-informed care at UND, and that's actually the book that I require students to read because it's something that people can grasp it, people can really understand it. So one of the things that, and specifically in the book that Dr. Bruce Perry and Oprah talk about is how the brain reacts. There's a lot of talk about that, and again, there's so much research. And I was talking to Holly before everybody jumped on that I have zero intention of ever going back to get another doctorate. But if I would, it would be like this, like neuropsychology and you know how the brain works, because I just think it's so fascinating. But it's really important for us to understand like how people are responding to things. Again, talks about going back to what has happened to them in the past. What has happened in terms of patterns, the intensity, the timing of whatever has happened in their lives. And any of those experiences shape who a person is, how they're acting, how they respond, why they do the things they do, when they do the things that they do. I think about, like I talk about even on a positive note, birthday parties. I always celebrated birthday parties when I was growing up. And so now my kids, we always celebrate birthday parties really big. In fact, this is my entire birthday month because my birthday is in April. And so I celebrate birthdays for the entire month because it's something that was important when I was brought up. So that's something that's beneath the surface is celebrating birthdays. Now I'm not like outwardly celebrating, but you know, those that are close to me know. But those are the things that we think about though, is what has happened, what has occurred, whether it's positive, negative, neutral, any sort of experience that has happened in a person's life, impacts choices that they make. And I also think about parenting, and especially when we're working with our clients who are parents, I think it's really important to understand what their upbringing was like. Right. So then going back again to that cultural iceberg, like digging down into this a little bit, like why are you choosing to do the things that you're choosing to do? Why did I choose to celebrate birthdays in just a huge way? It's because it was something that brought me joy and it was a positive experience for me. Now, my husband, on the other hand, they did not have big birthday parties. That was not a big thing. But then I'm like, no, we're going to, when he and I first met, I'm like, no, I celebrate my birthday for the entire month of April. And so then he learned like, oh, actually celebrating birthdays is really fantastic. But it was kind of a neutral thing for him. And so this is something that he has now adapted into what my upbringing was. But parenting styles, there's something I saw a quote just recently. It's like, hey, your kids are watching, and someday they're going to try to figure you out, right? So do you want to be the kind of parent that they look up to as a role model and they want to model their parenting after you? Or are you the kind of parent that they want to do the exact opposite? Right. And so I've had my kids are 17 and 19. And so we've talked about parenting. My daughter is in a relationship that they've talked about, like, because her and her boyfriend's they come from different backgrounds, and his parents parenting style is very different than like what my husband and I's parenting style is. And so my daughter and her boyfriend have talked about, okay, if we were to have kids, if we were to get married and have kids, what is this going to look like? Would you do something like this, or would you do something like this? And so the fact that they even talk about that and think about that now, again, as young adults, our kids are watching. And so what sorts of things do we want to do? My daughter has also talked about, yeah, I didn't always understand why you did the things you did, but now I understand, right? Because eventually they'll have that light bulb. Oh, that makes sense. Oh, okay, yep. Now I understand why you wanted me to do the dishes or whatever it is, right? All right. So again, the brain reacts in a hierarchical way. And so everything comes in through the brainstem. Okay. So this is something that is really, really important for people to understand, is when, if you learn nothing else about how the brain reacts, understanding this hierarchy, understanding that everything is processed through the brain. Okay. And everything moves up. We are going to respond before we're able to think. We're thinking with the prefrontal cortex, right? That's not where all of our experiences come in first. Everything's coming in through the brainstem. And so what's happening is everything is getting processed and is getting matched up with a previously lived experience. Okay. And so we're able to, so if it's if it's something that is traumatic, or if it's something that's positive or whatever that experience is getting matched up with a previously lived experience. It's getting kind of categorized, right? And so then the brain reacts how it had reacted previously to whatever that experience was. And so it gets matched up that way. So this is another really, this is something that I often ask people, is when you look at these words on the screen here, it's favorite song or movie quote or favorite food, any of these things on here. Like when I say favorite food, you all have something that came to your mind, right? When I say holiday memory, you all had something that came into your mind because it was a previously lived experience. So, I know we're coming up on the Easter holiday, and I know that one of the things that comes into my mind is I remember coming home, and when I was gone for college, and it was always a ham dinner, right? And I remember walking into my house and I could smell the ham dinner. And I have the same thing when I think about, because my mom loves to cook. So I think about that too, is that when I think about Thanksgiving. So when I said the word Thanksgiving, you probably had some sort of a memory that struck with you, right? When I think of Thanksgiving, when somebody says Thanksgiving, I think about the smell of turkey in my mom's house, right? These are the things that I think about. These are the associations that my brain makes. Now, if there's a holiday that isn't, that has a negative or a traumatic experience that's associated with it, somebody may experience that differently. So I just shared that Thanksgiving, I love, like, the first thing that comes to my mind is the smell of turkey and all the things cooking at my mom's house, right? So one would think, well, that's probably my mom's memory too, because my mom loves to cook. So my mom's memory that coincides with Thanksgiving is probably food, right? It's not. Her dad died on Thanksgiving. And so she has trauma that's associated with Thanksgiving. She struggles around that time of year every year. And she doesn't even necessarily have like the trigger of the actual date that he passed away, but it is that holiday because Thanksgiving lands on a different date every year, right? And so that's traumatic for her. So she struggles with Thanksgiving every year because that's when her dad died. And he died very young. And so she has that sort of a connection. So my mom and I are both experiencing the same thing at Thanksgiving, but we have very different responses to it. So there again, when we're working with our clients, understanding that things can have different responses for different people. And again, everything is coming in through the brainstem. So when I talked about smells, right? So when I think about turkey, it's associated, it gets categorized and filed away with Thanksgiving, right? So when I see this picture, when I show this picture, And again, if any of you have ever been in one of my classes or gone to my presentation before, you probably know where this is going. But those of you that have not, what do you think about when you see this picture? When you see this stack of towels, what are your thoughts? Everybody's gonna be shy.
Anybody? Oh, we
Yep.
got Faith said spa day. Alexis
Yeah.
said white towels to get dirty.
Yeah.
I like how neatly folded they are. Hotels. See, that was mine. I think of
Yeah.
hotels.
Right, right. I see, like, what I think about is too is like spa, hotel, nice, crisp, clean. They look fluffy, like, oh, they've probably used, some, Downy or whatever, right? Right? Yes, clean, neat, organized, right? And so these are all really positive things that we're saying about this stack of towels. However, think about somebody that has been a victim of sex trafficking. And maybe they jumped from hotel to hotel. So then all of a sudden, so when you and I are all thinking of something as like, how can you think of towels in a bad way? There are people that can experience a really negative trigger based on something that has been experienced before. And it's not for us to say, "Oh my God, that's ridiculous. It's just towels," right? They are the expert of their own story and of what they have experienced, right? So the white towels maybe triggers this negative feeling about a hotel for other people. And so that's why it's like trying to really learn about what has happened to a person in their past, what has happened to them, what are different experiences that they've had. So here's another one. What do you think about when you see this picture? When you see this gym, what are you seeing?
I think of buff
Yeah,
people.
yes, yes, right?
Fitness, places to distress, membership fees, protein shakes and sweat, motivation, grit, sweat, pain, sweaty,
Yeah.
sweat, sweat and exercise.
Somebody had told me one time when I showed this, they're like, they didn't re-rack the weights.
Oh.
And so it's stressing somebody out that somebody didn't put their weights back, right? So from a personal standpoint, so there's a few things with this. Like I see this too when somebody said buff and like sometimes I feel like I don't belong, right? Like I don't have the body style that belongs here, right? Um, this is a traumatic trigger for me from something that happened in my personal life is and not all gyms, just this one particular gym in I live in Bismarck that in Bismarck because of something that had happened. It was something that had happened outside of this gym. It was like I'm not going to go into it, but thinking about going into that particular gym is a trigger for me. So now somebody from the outside looking in might look at me and be like, "Oh my God, why doesn't she work out? Ugh, she's put on so much weight. Why doesn't she just go to the gym?" I have I have a really difficult time getting to a gym because of something that had happened to me in my past. Right? And so these are all the things that it no matter what it is. So for one person, it might be a stress reliever I saw in the chat, right? But for somebody else, it's like I can't drag myself here because of something that had happened in the past. So again, just knowing that everybody responds differently. Um, so then when we think about our regulatory system, it can absolutely be altered by a traumatic experience. Our stress response is, again, it's activated by the lower part of our brain. We are going to respond first before we're able to think. Things get processed at the lower part of our brain until we're able to like logically think like, no, it's fine. It's a gym. It's safe. It's okay, right? So before I can do that, I was responding first, and I remember pulling again. I was in a adjacent parking lot to this gym, and I had never had a panic attack before. I had read about them, I had heard about them. I had a panic attack. And it was like, what is going on right now? And it was because of I was parked outside of this. I was parked adjacent to this gym. And so when I was exposed to this, when I had this particular trigger, it was something that I was dysregulated. I froze, I was shaking, I was sweating, my hands were clammy, my heart was racing, had really, really erratic breathing. And this is something that was like, oh my God, what is happening? It's like, oh, that was a panic attack. Now I know what that is, unfortunately. And imagine people that are living in these sorts of situations where there's triggers all the time, all around them, right? And this is somebody that it could lead to somebody being dysregulated on a regular basis. So then this image on the right-hand side of the screen are just some examples of some dysregulated or dysregulation triggers. And this could be thinking about a kid that's in a classroom. If there's a smell that's coming from a cafeteria, or even maybe the cologne that a particular teacher is wearing, it could be a smell that is a negative trigger, whatever it might be. So again, our brain is making these associations between what had happened before. So the brain is looking for patterns. When something is coming into the brainstem, it's searching for, okay, what has happened before? And this is how these memories are created. And so it's referring back to these stored memories to be able to categorize these things. So one defense mechanism that people use is disassociation, disassociating or disengaging from the real world and really focusing on what's going on inside. And this is one, I remember when I first learned about disassociation, it was like the fight or flight, right? And that it would be, if somebody's using a fight or flight, it's like trying to protect that person from where they know that they're going to maybe be abused or something like that, that this is their way of protecting themselves. But this is allowing a person, if they know what is coming, or they're anticipating it, or that there is this trigger, so that this is, again, their brain is telling them, okay, when this happens, then this happens. So this is your brain telling the rest of your body, hey, this is what's coming up next. And then this disassociation mechanism allows people to survive an injury or to tolerate the pain or what have you. This is where it's releasing the body's own painkillers, or the endorphins. And then again, looking back at the timing, the pattern and the intensity of the traumatic experience really, really takes, has an effect on how a person is impacted and how they're disassociating and how frequently they might be disassociating. So disassociation could be a good thing. There are healthy ways of doing this. So here again are some really good tips and tricks. So if you're working with a child that's in school, that there are maybe complaints or concerns that, oh yeah, this child is daydreaming all day. That might be that child's way of disassociating, because they know what they're dealing with at home, or they're worried about what is going to happen at home when they go home, or what have you. And so there might be other ways of promoting a more healthy outlet. And it could be, again, daydreaming could be what that child is doing, but it also could be that they are really trying to zone out to push out what is really going on in their brain. So then refocusing that into a positive way, like I said, daydreaming, getting lost in a good book. How many of you have been on your phones and you're like scrolling through TikTok or Instagram or YouTube or whatever it is, and you're like, oh my God, 20 minutes just went by. I thought I was here for like 3, right? That's disassociation. Right? And so sometimes those things can be good. If you're like getting lost in Netflix, right? Like, I'm just going to watch the first little bit of this next Netflix series. And then all of a sudden now you've binge watched the first 3, episodes, right? So those are some of the things that disassociation can be, in a positive way. And other examples of disassociation for a positive is maybe soldiers in combat getting ready, for the game, getting ready, kind of being zeroed in on, a football game that's coming up or what have you. And so disassociation, when used in a positive way, is being used intentionally, making sure that it is something that's predictable, something that's controllable, something that's moderate, something that is helping reduce stress. So this is a really good example. Is there is maybe an example that you maybe see. But there was a boy that was referred to a medical doctor because to be evaluated by for ADHD, right? They're being evaluated for ADHD because of concerns at school. So the school nurse refers the student. And the physicians do what they're supposed to do. They're reviewing their medical record and they see that this child is in the 50th percentile for a 4-year-old. Okay. And so when they're looking, though, they flip through the rest of the medical record. And when they see the boy, what they see is similar to this picture here. Is those two boys are very, very different in height, right? But the difference is that this person that was referred to this medical doctor is the 50th percentile for a 4-year-old, but the child is actually 7. Okay, so this child is very, very short, and it's because so then they meet with the mom and are like, okay, what's going on here? So then this doctor knew enough to dive into what has happened in this 7-year-old's past. Well, this 7-year-old, when he was 4, was sexually abused by a family friend. So then it stunted this child's growth. Right? Because of the trauma that this child experienced when he was 4, that's what has happened in this child's past. And that's why his growth had been stunted. And so he is, and then the dad, because it was a family friend of the dad, and so the dad was really angry, and is blaming himself. And so then he is disassociating by drinking. So then the dad is drinking. He is drunk frequently. The mom is showing signs of depression because she just doesn't know what to do. And so with all of these things, so here again, we're looking at the whole person, right? We're looking at not just the medical record. We're not just looking at, is the child acting out in school or not, but we're looking at the whole person and looking at the whole history. What has happened? What has happened to the person and what is going on right now? Because those things impact the next direction, is how they're going to work towards, okay, what are our next steps? How do we move forward and work on the healing process with this child and with this family? So oftentimes we think about when somebody has come from an abusive background or somebody that has dealt with trauma, that they are in a relationship and they stay, right? How many times have we heard this? Like, oh my God, I can't believe, why don't they just leave? Why don't they just leave? What are they doing, right? But the difference here is that their brain is seeking something that is predictable. This is what they know, right? So again, when thinking about the brainstem, they feel love. And so when they're feeling this, they're feeling this love, even though it's this person that has been abusing them. So they're really torn. Like on one hand, they feel abused in some cases, but then in the other hand, it's like, well, this is how I'm showing love, right? And so when things are coming in through the brainstem, it's like, well, I'm showing you love. This is my way of showing love. So also, if somebody has been brought up in an abusive household, they might be drawn to somebody that is abusive in a relationship because that's what's familiar. That's what they know. That's what they understand. That's what's comfortable, right? Just like celebrating birthdays was big for me because that was comfortable. That was my family's way of showing love. Right. And so the same thing, even though we may see it as, oh my God, no, this is abusive. This is awful. That's comfortable. That's what their brain is telling them is normal for them. People can change though. Like if they're intentional, like, no, this actually doesn't feel as good as I thought it did. They can be intentional, and they can rewire the brain. I love this. I love this image on here because we can build new associations. Our brain is magnificent, right? The plasticity with our brain, all of those things. It's super, super interesting that we can rewire our brains. We can learn new things, right? Think about somebody that had a stroke and they now have left-sided weakness. And maybe they were left-handed dominant, but because of their stroke, they've had to learn how to use their right hand as their dominant hand, right? Our brains are able to rewire themselves to learn these new skills and abilities. So I love this image where it shows the frontage road on the side of this interstate. There's still a few cars on there. There's 5, 6 cars on there, right? It's still useful. It's still going to get you from A to B. But the 6-lane highway in the middle is much more efficient. It's better. It's more positive. It's going to get you there maybe safer and in a more efficient manner. And there's more positive things on that 6-lane highway than on that gravel frontage road. That gravel frontage road doesn't go away though. It's still there. So there still might be things that come up. My parents have been divorced for over 20 years, but it still impacts me, right? Like I'm just like, okay, yeah, I'm over that. I have my own family, my own life, whatever, right? But there are still things that come up because that 4-lane highway, that association is still in my brain. It's still there. It doesn't go away, but it does get better, right? Because look at all the cars that were on that 6-lane highway. But just in short, the neuroplasticity is the brain's capacity to change and to adapt. Repetition, being able to do more things in a more positive way. So if I start going to a different gym, that will help me get over not being able to go to that one particular gym, right? Training myself, being intentional. Now I do just need to get up and go, right? I understand that, right? My New Year's resolution failed on day 2. Anyway, but being able to understand and being intentional, like I want to get over this hurdle that I have. So what can we do? What are some interventions that we have? What are some things that we can do as a community, as helpers, as family, as friends, as whoever we are and working in whatever capacity? Creating a therapeutic web is so important. Being able to look at all of the different opportunities throughout a day and focusing on the positives. If somebody is dealing with some negative things, if they're dealing with a lot of traumatic triggers, focusing on some of those positives, because there can be a lot of things throughout a day that can be really triggering for somebody and have negative impacts. But looking at and focusing on all of the other opportunities that come up and that occur throughout the day, and looking at all of the healthy relationships and all of those healthy bonds. They talk about like a therapeutic moment can be brief, right? It can be something that is really brief. It does not have to be a 50-minute counseling session every other week, right? It could be a 5-minute interaction. And like I think about like this image here, it looks like, to me, this looks like maybe a grandpa and a granddaughter that are enjoying some ice cream. That looks like a really great bond between those two people. They're sharing a silly moment with ice cream, right? That is a positive interaction that is helping rewiring the brain to help build trust, to help understand these positive relationships. All of us in this helping profession can help people rewire their brain so that they understand the positives with positive relationships and looking at all of the other good things that are going on in a person's life. So again, everything is coming in through the brain stem, and it's really, really important to be able to make sure that somebody is regulated. So like I talked about before, if somebody is dysregulated, they're not going to be able to process things that you're telling them, right? So if their brain is dysregulated, if they have been having, if they're in the middle of a panic attack, if they're in the middle of something that has triggered them, they're not going to be able to process anything. If you're telling them everything's fine, they don't know that. It's important to really help them be regulated so that their system can all be, much more calm so that they can actually move things up through the brain stem and get to that prefrontal cortex so that they can understand and feel and see and know that they are okay, that they are safe. Right? But somebody that is constantly dysregulated, they're not going to be able to process things like that. Right? So it is really important that we are helping them in any way that we can to try to regulate them. So, a few other interventions that I wanted to share with you. So, breathing exercises. This is so important. The sympathetic nervous system, or the SNS. This is using the chemicals like adrenaline. This is what is causing our body, like, yeah, we are going to take action. And then this sympathetic nervous system, this is what is helping regulate our body. So this is like what's triggering our dream cycles and things like that. So when we inhale, we are activating the SNS, right? This is what is increasing our heart rate. And then when we exhale, it stimulates the PNS, or what is helping to decrease our heart rate. Now, healthy individuals will inhale and exhale steadily. They have a good heart rate, right? They have a good and normal heart rate. Now, if a person is dysregulated on a regular basis, if they've experienced trauma, if there's been some triggers, then their breathing is going to be out of sync, right? Like when I talked about when I had my panic attack, right? Everything was out of sync. And so then what happens is if their systems are out of sync, they're going to be vulnerable, and they're going to, like, excuse me, over respond to some minor stressors, right? It could be that, they forgot their, textbook before class. And it's like, okay, you don't need your textbook in class today. If you forget it, the professor's going to go over all of the notes, but they may absolutely panic because they left their textbook at home because they're not able to deal with these minor stressors. Okay. And then here's just an activity on the right-hand side, some mindful breathing activities for children. Another intervention is meditating, and this is relaxation that is induced by meditation. It helps stabilize our nervous system. It leads to that calmness and that well-being, and it helps calm and quiet our mind. So then here's a mantra meditation, and this is a technique that is used where short chants are used. And so this just takes it step by step. I won't read through every single step with you, but if you go through each of these steps, just like thinking about and helping your clients, like think of a word. It could be a sentence, it could be a word, it could be a syllable. Closing your eyes, allow yourself to relax as much as possible, but then really thinking about, like, being intentional again. Like if a person finds their mind wandering, bring them back to center, focusing on the words, the phrases. So yoga, interestingly enough, is a combination of breathing and meditation, and then also stretching. And this helps reduce muscle tension and helps increase flexibility and strength. So here's just a couple of websites that kind of take people through step-by-step yoga steps and poses and things like that. And again, these are things that are free and don't cost anything, but really can be very helpful when we're working with somebody that has experienced trauma. So grounding exercises are also really important. And you guys, I could talk for hours and hours about all the different things that could be useful. And I know we're running short on time, but I want to just talk about another exercise that can be used that for the purpose of grounding. So if somebody is experiencing a traumatic event, or if they're being triggered, or if they're dysregulated, focusing on their five senses. And here's just an example that you could do is choose something, whatever it is. Maybe it's a mint that you have in your vehicle or in your office that you offer a mint, or a sucker or something like that, right? Whatever it might be. And then, and the person that is taking this, sucker, mint, or whatever, examining it, looking at it, smelling it, feeling it. What does it feel like? Really inspecting it. And then as you start taking, take a bite of it or put it into your mouth, and then thinking about the texture, thinking about the flavor. And then as you bite into it, begin to chew, and what does that feeling feel like? So you're using all of your senses, being mindful of, like, your jaw going up and down as you're chewing on a piece of gum, thinking about that movement, thinking about the taste. And then continuing to think about even after you've swallowed this food item, like, is there an aftertaste? Are there any other lingering feelings or sensations that you're feeling? Like, was it a cinnamon mint and you kind of feel that tingling a little bit, right? So this is going to ground a person and bring them back to that center. So other things that we can do, and you all are participating in this, is being trauma informed, raising awareness and understanding this and promoting trauma informed practice. And then also creating prevention, trauma prevention, where you're working and with your clients, increasing access then to these interventions that are going to mitigate and really decrease that trauma exposure. Prioritizing self-care for all the social workers in this Zoom room. Part of our NASW Code of Ethics is to take care of ourselves. We can't take care of somebody unless we have taken care of ourselves, right? And I know I've shared my own personal stuff that has happened, and I have sought counseling myself because I needed to make sure that I was capable of taking care of others, right? Whether it's at my job and helping students, or whether it's at home with my kids, my husband, etc. So just a few quick points about self-care. Different types of self-care. Again, there's tons and tons and tons of resources available for self-care. And these are just 4 quick types that if you can put them into your bucket. Now, does everybody have to do every single one of these things every single day? No. When I was in school, self-care was, oh, you should schedule yourself a massage. I was broke as a joke. There was no way I was going to be able to afford a massage, let alone do it on a regular basis. But self-care can be just going to bed at a decent time, right? Taking 5 minutes, making sure that you have lunch every day, right? Making sure that you're, scheduling a break, going outside, whatever it is. You see yoga on there under physical, right? But making sure, and it's also under spiritual, but making sure that you are, whatever self-care means to you, whatever works for you. For me personally, I work from home. In the summer, I love sitting on my deck. I make sure that every day that it's not raining, I'm spending some time out on the deck. Here are just some different activities. Again, everybody is different. Everybody's self-care plan is different. I also encourage students to make an emergency self-care plan. So I would encourage you all to make an emergency self-care plan. Like, hey, when things really go crazy, what can you do? What are some things that you know that you can do, like when things are really, really stressful? Here again are some really, really great resources that speak to self-care and the importance of it. And I love this quote. Almost everything will work again if you unplug it for a few minutes, including yourself. Just taking some time, right? And then, as promised, some of the things that I'll talk about, if you all are interested in joining me in May, we'll talk more about the dysregulation and regulation, what that looks like, and how to regulate a person and ourselves, and the importance of making sure that they're regulated before they can really start processing and starting that healing process. We'll talk more about supports and interventions, more mindfulness exercises and activities. I know I touched on a few practical things that you can do, starting with that, the cultural iceberg, and all the way over through our the grounding exercise of eating, right? We'll also talk about like rhythm and sound and how that will help with dysregulation and regulation. And we'll talk a little bit more about self-care because it's very important. It's something we should always be sure to do. And there's my contact information available to all of you on the last slide. Just under the wire, I did it.
Yes,
There's so many things I'd love to share.
I
So
know.
I appreciate you letting me zip through some of this stuff.
Well, we appreciate you being here.
Yes. Any questions?
Yes, questions for Jennifer. Also, please see the chat. There's a post-test survey in SurveyMonkey. But any questions for Jennifer?
I have a question. It's related to trauma-informed case management. But we've just been experiencing quite an increase of difficult situations where we're not quite sure where to really hold some strong boundaries with people with some mental health and that are experiencing maybe triggering behaviors from previous trauma, and when to make sure that we're low barrier enough and
Yeah.
keeping trauma informed care as well. Just walking that line. I'd just
Yes.
like to know your thoughts.
Yes, and it's tricky, right? And it's different for everybody, right? What might work for one person works for another person or maybe doesn't work. I would go back to like, honestly, I think about like parenting. Like my kids are so similar, but discipline, if they did the exact same thing wrong and they both needed discipline, one would work for one and one would not work for the other. And so it really depends on what that person needs. And ultimately, you have to protect yourself, right? You have to be careful and not making sure that this isn't something that is going to alter your work and altering your feelings. You want to make sure that you do have those healthy boundaries and those professional boundaries, not taking phone calls after hours, right? Like it's okay to shut off your phone, right? You don't have to be emergency services for everybody, and that's okay. It's okay to say no, and making sure that they do have all the supports that they need to be safe, secure, feeling supported, but that doesn't have to be just you. You don't have to be everything to everyone at every time. So I think it's tricky. It absolutely is tricky. So the best thing I would say is use your best judgment, making sure that you are just led by your professional ethics and staff it with supervisors and other coworkers. Hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about this? Getting, bouncing things off really can gauge a person's temperature on something like, hey, what do you think if I did this? Or how about this? And then knowing that there isn't a one size fits all. So does that help a little bit?
It does. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. Anything else? All right. Well, I appreciate all of you attending today and listening to this topic that could be really, really heavy, right? And so I appreciate your willingness to take it all in and apply it to your work. And like I said, if there's anything that you need from me down the road, don't hesitate to reach out. But thanks for having me, okay?
Yes.
Take
Thank you,
care.
Jennifer.
Yeah.
Great presentation, and we look forward to seeing you in May.
Awesome. All right. You guys all have a great rest of your week, okay?
You too.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.